Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for attending with us today. Oh, wow. It's so great to see everyone just kind of funneling in. Wonderful. We'll just wait a minute or two just for, to allow everybody to enter. I know that this got a really high response from our customers, so I'm really excited about that. Um, I would love to hear where you're coming to us from in the chat. So if you'd like to throw your current location, maybe the organization you're with in the chat, that would be great. It's also wonderful. I'm just looking at the participants list and I'm seeing so many names that I know from customer care. So welcome to all of our current customers. I'm really excited to see you here. Wonderful. Oh, somebody else is from Hamilton. I'm from Hamilton. That's where I am right now. Wonderful. Oh, everywhere. This is fantastic. I'm so glad to see it. Oh, more Chicago folks. Lydia, you've got some kin there. This is fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad everyone's coming from so many places. Love this. Oh, this is great. Okay, folks, please keep putting your location and your greetings and where you're coming from in the chat. I am so excited to see all of you here. We currently have 57 of you that are in attendance, so I am going to get started with my introduction, and then we will pass the torch over to Lydia so we can hear her fantastic program today. So we're going to jump in. I'm really excited that you would take some time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Elise. I'm a customer support specialist here at Keela, and I've spoken with several of you that I'm seeing the names of via email, so I'm really excited to connect with you in this way. I'm a former Keela user myself from a nonprofit, so I've been right where you are, and I know how busy this time of year is, so thank you for dedicating this time to spend with us. We also have my amazing colleague, Chelsea, our digital designer. She's helping us today on the tech side of things. You might see her in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions, so please feel free to say hello to Chelsea. I do want to acknowledge that Keela's head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. I give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you are new to Keela and you're not one of the lovely folks I have spoken with before, welcome. Keela is a fundraiser CRM meaning that it is specifically designed for the unique needs of fundraisers. It aims to unify fundraising, communications, and donor management into a single source of truth. And basically what that means is we want to help you provide all of your data kind of in one place so you have the most chances for success. Should you have any questions during the presentation that you would like Lydia to answer, please enter them either in the chat box or in the Q&A section, and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. Speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everybody when you're typing questions in. Just allows all of our guests to read your comments and your questions. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a recording at the end of the week. So I am just starting that recording right now. All right, there we go. So now I am very excited to welcome today's expert speaker, Lidia Varesco Racoma of Lidia Varesco Designs. Lydia empowers organizations to make a change through strategic branding and marketing design. She is a blogger and speaker and leads branding and creative marketing workshops for nonprofit associations and small businesses around the world. We are thrilled to have you join us today, Lydia, so please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Elise. I am so happy to be here. We were just talking about, I think this is my 7th or 8th time presenting with Keela, and I'm just thrilled. It's always wonderful. And I love making connections through Keela and sharing all this great information. So let me start my screen share. All right. So today we're going to be talking about nonprofit content calendars. So this is something that I love talking about. I was just updating a content calendar for one of my clients, so it's completely top of mind. And I should be able to answer any questions that you have since I've just been inside working in in a content calendar this morning. But I'm hoping that today you'll get some great information to either create one if you don't have one. You'll get a lot of great information if you don't have one, and then also to maybe even just make improvements or get some new ideas. And I'm looking forward to getting your questions in the chat as well so we can brainstorm and share ideas. All right, so today's agenda, we'll first talk about why you should have a content calendar, why they're important, and then we'll get to know different types of content calendars. We'll go through the process of creating a content calendar, and I'll be showing you some examples along the way. And then we'll talk about integrating your calendar with your social scheduling and how that may happen. After that, we'll take some questions. Again, you can drop them in the chat along the way. This will stop me if it's something kind of in the moment. I'm always happy to take those kind of questions in the moment. And then I do have a bunch of resources for you. So as you follow along, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there will be a footer that will call out some of those resources. And then at the very end, there's going to be a URL where you can see all of those resources. And I'm happy to, chat about those as well. All right, so first we're going to take a quick poll. I'm just a little curious, just, I always like to know, and it also helps me with the content for the session, is how many of you are currently using a content calendar effectively in your organization? So first is yes, second one is maybe, not really sure, and the last one, no, please help, which we will do today. But I just kind of wanted to get a sense. So we'll take about a minute or so to get your votes in. And in the meantime, yeah, you can start thinking about some of those questions that you might have regarding content calendars. All right, how are we looking on the poll? Okay, so we've got, all right, this is good. I mean, good for me. We're pretty evenly split between the maybes and the no. Please help me. There's 20% that are using it effectively. Yay. Well, I think you'll still get some good ideas today for sure, because it's always, you can always make improvements. But I'm really excited to help those of you that are either the maybes or the no's, because I think you'll get some great information today. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. All right, so let's move along. All right. So I pulled some stats. I always like when I do my presentations, I always like to pull stats from recent nonprofit reports, just to kind of see, things change from year to year and just sort of see, what's going on in the industry. So there's a new report that came out not too long ago from SEM Rush. They are an SEM company. So it's the state of content marketing, their global report for last year. So they've shown that content marketing is the largest and most effective ROI of marketing for brands. So, and again, this is not exclusively nonprofits. They're polling a lot of different types of organizations, which does include nonprofits. But they found that content marketing is providing a higher ROI to organizations as opposed to doing, paid advertising or, that type of marketing. So that is good to know. It's a definite good reason to focus on your content marketing. And then also in that same report from last year, they found that only 19% were using an editorial calendar to execute their marketing plans. So that's interesting. That really lines up with our poll today as well. How many people said they were really using those calendars effectively. So if you're not in that 20%, it's not a surprise because a lot of other organizations and marketers are struggling as well with, executing that content calendar. So let's first talk about why it's important to have a content calendar for your organization. And this is a great quote. I really like to start with this one. It's not the best content that wins, it's the best promoted content that wins. I am totally on board with that. This is Andy Crestadina of Orbit Media. He is a fellow Chicagoan. Um, Orbit Media is a digital marketing company here in Chicago. He's also a speaker and prolific blogger, amazing content if you ever have a chance to look it up. But it's true, it's really, you might have an awesome blog post, but if you're not putting it out there, nobody reads it. So if that's not a win. So definitely you want to have that system to promote your content. And one of those ways is the content calendar. So here's why you need a content calendar. This is what it looks like when you don't have a content calendar. Everything's a little bit scattered. You probably, most of you probably have all these different types of content that you're putting out for your organization. Of course, you have your website and your email marketing campaigns and social media. Maybe you have a blog. Maybe you're doing podcasts or webinars, or some type of guides or toolkits. But it's all just kind of floating out there. It doesn't really have a system. So what ends up happening in that case is that your content outreach is scattered. So you don't have that system and it's not consistent. That means that you're generally going to be scrambling to create content, and it's going to take you longer to create that content. Your posting will be inconsistent, which means people may not notice it, if it's only coming every couple months. And then worse than that is the content is not relevant to your audience, which means they're not going to even read it because they're not going to feel connected to it or have a reason to read it. But now with the content calendar, we can kind of pull all those things together and we can have organization with our content. We can have a better strategy. You'll be more efficient and consistent. There's relevance to your content. And ultimately, most importantly, you'll be making an impact with your content. So the first part of that is staying organized. And that's really kind of the basic purpose of the content calendar, right? Like we want to keep everything organized in one place where everybody can find it easily. And it's the nice thing about it is that it's a visual reference. So you can actually see all of your content at a glance. Depending on the type of calendar that you have, you can see how the various content pieces and channels integrate. So you'll see like the samples that I show you, I'm including, not just social media, but blogs and email campaigns and podcasts and all different things, because all of those things are integrating and you do want to make sure that your content is based on all those pieces. And then the other benefit of that visual reference is that you can see the gaps in your content marketing. So you can look at it at a glance and say, oh my goodness, we haven't posted a blog in a month or more. We really need to make sure that we do that for this month. And then you'll see at the bottom one of our stats here, 25% of people that they polled here, that same SEM Rush report, they say that organizing content marketing is a challenge. That's their top challenge. So yes, I'm not surprised that many of you are also finding that challenge. Many of my clients also have that challenge, and then that's where I can kind of help them get organized. And then next with the calendar, your content marketing can be more strategic. So this is really important. So when you have that strategy, you want to make sure you have a way to implement it, a system to implement it. So with the calendar, you can focus on the topics that are relevant to your audience. You can create those integrated multi-channel campaigns. So like I kind of touched upon, having a blog and then that blog topic is also in your email and then it's also on social, everything's connecting. And then you're also being sure to address those pain points that your audience is having and ultimately creating the content that your audience wants to read and that they will engage with, they'll come back for. And then next, even, more importantly, your content marketing can be more efficient when you have a calendar. Again, you're not scrambling, you're planning, you're scheduling in advance, you have a structure that makes it easier to create new content as well as repurposing content because we definitely want that to be part of our strategy. And then your whole team can plug into the calendar and contribute, which is also really important because most of the time, one person can't do it all. You need the input from the various members of your team. So they need to be able to all be involved in this and make it more efficient. And like I put in my tip here, content calendars are definitely a must when you have a small team, or even maybe say like a one person team who's doing the marketing. It's definitely a must. And then next, your content will be more consistent when you have that calendar in place. And again, a stat here from our report from SEMrush, 43% of organizations say that publishing more content and increasing that frequency has led to success. Well, of course, that's not a surprise. So you need to have that system so that you're able to do that. You're able to provide that frequency and consistency with your content. So with the calendar, you can easily determine, a weekly or monthly posting schedule. You can have themes. You can post, much more consistently. You can maintain that regular communication with your audience and then start to make that genuine connection because people are seeing your content on a regular basis. They're seeing the themes that you're talking about, and they're going to start looking for them and, waiting for them. So one of the tips I have here is scheduling regular posts. So you might say every second Monday we do a program update. And again, you put that on your calendar, it's expected, your team knows they have to give you a program update, prior to that date, and you're consistent, you're creating that consistency. And then next, your content marketing will be more relevant. So this is a really good one. And you'll see in the examples that I show you, I have a slot where you can start to put in some of those holidays, commemorative months, special occasions that are, relevant to your organization or to your audience. And that helps to assure that topics are timely. And I think nowadays, especially, people are definitely tapping into those holidays. I get a lot of like emails from companies that are really fun. They're tapping into a holiday and they're aligning it with their brand messaging in a really fun and exciting, unique way. And then your posts are also more relevant because, if you know that your audience is going to be um, aware of this holiday or this commemorative month, then you want to make sure that you are also aware of it and you are, putting that out into your content marketing accordingly. And as I keep saying, like the main thing is that your audience is relating to your content. They're engaging with it and they're wanting to read more or engage with you in other ways as well. And then next, your content marketing will have more impact. And that's also something that in the report showed that over half of the marketers that were polled, they're using brand engagement as their top way to determine ROI and the effectiveness of their content. And having that impact is really going to help with that brand engagement and help you gauge that. So again, like when you have that consistency, you're putting the content out, it's on brand, it's on message, it's going to resonate with your audience. They'll feel seen and understood, and they'll want to come back more or take action and ultimately make that genuine connection with your organization. So this is what it looks like, when we have that lovely organized content plan where everything is together, it's organized, they're connected to each other, they work together. And this is really the goal of, having the calendar is pulling it all together. So yeah, as I just mentioned, so your content's organized, it's strategic, you can create more efficiently, take less time, be more consistent in your outreach, more relevant, and ultimately have that impact that we're looking for. So now let's start to get to know our content calendars and what you may find on the content calendar. All right, so I'm going to show examples from a couple different kinds. There are very many templates out there. If you search for content calendar template, you will get probably endless samples of templates. I've looked at many, many templates over the years. I've settled on kind of two different types that I like to use with clients, kind of depending on their needs. One is a spreadsheet type of template, as you can see on the left. And then another one is a little more of a visual one, which you see on the right. And again, as I mentioned, I will be sharing resources. I do have templates for both of these approaches so that you can, check them out and try them. And they're both very adaptable, but they're both a good place to start. So If you are a little bit more used to that spreadsheet kind of approach, the one on the left might be a little more comfortable. That one in particular is created in Google Sheets, so it's very easy to edit and personalize and share with the team. The example on the right is created in Trello. So Trello, if you're not familiar, is a project management software. So similar to, nowadays there's so many. There's Trello, there's Asana, there's ClickUp, Monday, and basically they share similar characteristics in that they have that sort of Kanban look where it's, you see it in columns and phases, as well as this calendar look. And the reason why I was drawn to this type of content calendar for one of my clients was that visual approach. I really liked this calendar where I could kind of see at a glance, what's coming up, what meetings are coming up, what, newsletters are coming up, newsletter campaigns. So it's really a different, they're both visual, but you kind of get a different approach. And like I said, we'll look a little bit more in depth for each of them as we move on. So now let's talk about the parts of a content calendar. So I sort of talked about a few of these as we were going through the benefits of the content calendar, but basically you want to start with the essentials. So of course we want to have the dates. So however you approach it, whether you have that spreadsheet type of calendar and you enter in all the dates, as a column, whether you're using more of that visual kind of project management system and you have kind of a traditional calendar, but you just want to make sure that you have a way to see your calendar that is comfortable for you, that will be useful to you. Like I said, like for me with the one client, it was more useful to kind of have that, month at a glance, that calendar view, color coded and, that type of thing. So that's the first part of it. And then next, you want to make sure that you have a place where you're indicating holidays and commemorative months that are relevant to your organization. And again, I'll have some resources for, those holidays and commemorative months. Um, there's so many, and like I said, nowadays a lot of brands are kind of, using those fun ones like it's Donut Day or, something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can have as far as which types of holidays, if you stay a little more serious or if you, have fun with it. And then next, you want to make sure that you're adding your organization events. So maybe you want to make sure that you're tracking, when your meetings are, your board meetings, when you're launching your annual report, when you're launching your various fundraising appeals. All of that should go on the calendar because you definitely don't want to be caught off guard with, oh my goodness, our appeal's coming up. We didn't, start promoting it yet or start scheduling and promotions around it. Excuse me. And then next, you want to add any special campaigns that your organization may have throughout the year. So again, like the events, you just want to make sure that you're not surprised or caught off guard and that you can prepare in advance. So for example, one of my clients, they always do a blog post when the annual report is completed. So this way they can have it on their website, they can share that blog on social media, and they can make videos about it and, various ways of promoting it. So you definitely want to make sure that anything that's, really important to the organization is on that content calendar so that you can start to create those campaigns around it. And then the next part is this is sort of on, you'll see when I show examples, this may be on a different tab or kind of, in a different place on the calendar, but you want to start brainstorming some of the topics that you'll be writing about in your content, the various types of topics. And again, I'll show you examples of those as well as categories. And those are important because you do want to track those as you're posting about them. You want to make sure, okay, we're not just posting about our programs, but we're also posting some behind the scenes content, or we're doing a volunteer spotlight. Again, it helps you to visually see, is the content varied enough? Are we being consistent in our efforts? And then the content channels, of course, you want to have on there, which channels you're posting to, whether that's social, your blog, your email, podcasting, any of those marketing channels that you're using. And then optionally, what you might want to add to your content calendar is post copy. So this is something that I've been experimenting with some of the calendars that I maintain for my clients is sometimes the post copy is separate in a document, sometimes it's actually in the calendar. And again, this may be sort of what you're comfortable with, who's writing it, is it you who's managing the calendar who's writing it, or are you working with writers? So again, this may be something that you do differently based on your workflow, but having a place for it is very important. So that post copy, hashtags that you may be using, image links, and then again, like ideas. If you want to have a place on your content calendar where your team can just brainstorm ideas, and that visual Trello based calendar is a great place for something like that, where you can just kind of brainstorm and it's separate, apart from that actual calendar. And then I also suggest keeping track of your evergreen content because I know that everyone at some point you end up where you maybe don't have something in mind, for this week. So you can just go to that tab with your evergreen content, pull something and give it a new life, on your social channels or wherever else you're publishing. And then lastly, you may want to have links to your analytics just, to keep everybody in the loop. It's kind of a good idea. I've done that you'll see in the Trello calendar example. I've got a link for, wherever you store your analytics, and then an approval workflow. So again, that's where that Trello-based calendar comes in handy because it does have a little bit more of an approval workflow system as opposed to just a spreadsheet. So these are all, again, like you want to start with those essentials and then you can add on some of those optional parts of the calendar. And you know what? I am going to take a quick peek at the chat just to see if there's anything in the moment. Okay, so evergreen content. Yes, I see Kiera asked about that. So evergreen content is basically a post that is going to be relevant throughout the year. It's not necessarily referencing, an event or a date or something that is very specific in time. So you can reuse that. So you can maybe reuse it again 6 months from now. You can reuse it next year. A great example of evergreen content would be also maybe like an interview or a podcast that somebody did, something that it doesn't have to happen on a specific day or season or time, but it can really be kind of filled in those gaps. So hopefully that makes sense. And let's see, let me just browse really quick just to make sure if there is anything. Otherwise, yeah, some of these we might just save for the end. I just wanted to make sure that one I address in the moment. Okay, so let's move on to creating a content calendar. So basically 4 steps here. You want to create the template. So, starting with a template or creating it from scratch, add those relevant dates that we talked about. Then you want to build the team. And again, it could be one person that's managing it, or it could be a couple of people or a team that's all going to be involved. And then lastly is planning the content. So first we'll start with creating that template. So as I mentioned, there's so many templates out there. The one that I created was probably, pulled together from hundreds that I looked at, and didn't like. I liked this about this one, but I didn't like this. So I ended up creating my own. And that may happen with you as well. You may find one that you like. It's a good starting point, and that's great. That's really what you want to do is just have that starting point. But first you want to, before you buy the template, you want to determine your needs. So what content channels are you using? What is the size of your team? What does your content workflow process look like? Are you thinking about free versus paid apps? And then you can start researching those templates. Like I said, you can see, what you like, what you don't like, and how to kind of pull them together. And a couple different ways that I've created content calendars, Google Sheets, Trello or Asana has that kind of like Kanban workflow that some people like for content calendars. And Notion. Notion is a new one that I just started using for a lot of other purposes. And I thought, yeah, Notion would probably be a good one. I'll probably create a template, content calendar template eventually for Notion as well. And then you want to, as you're creating the template, you want to compile all of your current content. So the channels you're posting on, your posts, your frequency, you want to just kind of see everything at a glance. And you want to review your content, keeping the strategy in mind. You want to, think about those goals and needs, that you determined in your strategy. And this is a good, it's almost kind of like a brain dump, kind of like pulling all the content, putting it all in one place, just to kind of see, it will also help you to see, like, are we posting things that are not necessarily aligned with our strategy? So it's just kind of a nice little, brain dump to do as you're starting to put together the calendar. And then the good thing, like my tip here, is as you do kind of pull together all that content, is that you can use that list to start putting together your evergreen content. Okay, so next you want to start adding those relevant dates. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, fundraising campaigns, any sort of yearly campaigns that come up in your organization. So maybe when you launch your annual report, your impact reports, your strategic plan, all of those things are important to be on the content calendar, of course. Any sort of events that you have internally or externally. So maybe I would suggest even some of those internal, if there's like board meetings or things that are important to the organization that you want to be able to share with your audience, as well as external events that your organization is participating in. And then again, those commemorative weeks or months and holidays that we talked about. And you'll see at the bottom, there is in the resources, I've got first, there's a 2024 diversity calendar that Diversity Resources puts together that is a really good one to look at. And then there's also Nonprofit Tech for Good puts together a cause awareness and giving day calendar. So that's also a good one to look at. And then, like I said, Google search, you can find a lot of these things as well. And I'm going to look at the chat because I do see a question from Chris as far as like how to compile those posts, like I mentioned. You can literally just copy and paste them, dump them into a document. And maybe you don't even necessarily have to take the whole post. Maybe you're just taking the titles. So if you're using, say, WordPress for your blog, you could, export it from WordPress. It's just a good exercise to kind of see where you're at right now with your content, almost like a little mini content audit. All right, so next you want to start building the content team. So this is where you're going to determine who's responsible for what. So who'll be doing the writing, who's designing the graphics, who's doing the scheduling, who's doing the engagement, and following up with people who are engaging with your page. And then you want to create your workflow. So do you have a system for coming up with ideas and then taking those ideas into the writing phase and then the approval phase and then ultimately the scheduling and posting phase? And again, like apps like Trello are great for that because it has that Kanban where you kind of pull it from columns, from the ideas column into the writing column. But again, like I said, every organization does it differently, but it's good to at least map out your workflow. And then lastly, invite the team members to join the calendar and do a little demo for them. So whether you have that spreadsheet-based calendar, whether you're using something like Trello or Notion, you want to make sure that everybody is familiar with it and knows how to use it. And lastly, think about, do you need outside help? Do you need to hire somebody, to help with either building or maintaining the calendar? That's important as well. And then lastly, you want to start planning your content. So there's a tip here that I thought was really good from Content Marketing Institute, which is a great resource if you're interested in learning more about content marketing. They have great webinars and blogs and different things. But they suggest to use an agile approach. So they say, lay out blog post specifics for the next month, but keep the calendar flexible. So if something unexpected happens, you can like pull that blog, and put something else in, or pull that post and replace it with something that's more timely. And I thought that was great. Like I think the days of planning out your calendar for the year, are over. I think that everybody's trying to plan things either monthly or quarterly so that you do have that space in your calendar for either the unexpected or, something else that, something that you decide you want to kind of slot into the calendar, that you have a space. So I would say, like, with my calendar for my business and with my clients, we generally look at maybe like 1 or 2 months at a time. Some organizations do quarterly, which is fine. And then you also want to think about those themes. We started to talk about it. Do you want to have a monthly theme that you're going to be kind of building your content around? Do you want to have weekly themes? Those are all really important for maintaining that consistency. And then again, you want to schedule regular sessions with your team so that you can either brainstorm ideas, kind of look at how things are working, make any changes that you need to make. And then lastly is creating the content. So this is where, I think it's helpful to look at your past content to, kind of see where you've been and see where you want to take your strategy in the future. So then you can start to create that posting frequency and schedule. So for example, you might say we'll be posting a blog on the first Tuesday of the month. We'll be sending out our email on the second Wednesday. We'll be doing social media daily or 3 times a week or 2 times a day, whatever that frequency is that makes sense for your organization. But you're creating the schedule. And then basically every month, this is repeated on the calendar. And it's nice because you get to know it internally and then your audience as well. They start to wait for it, like, oh, I think this week I'll be getting an email, from this organization. Like they'll start to get to know your cadence as well. And then next you want to start to create copy docs. So, documents where you have like post copy, blog copy, or decide where to store that copy. So I think somebody may have asked something along those lines. And yes, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can do that within your calendar. You can store copy within the calendar. You can have a separate drive where you create those copy docs. I think both, are useful. I think with blogs, you definitely want to store that outside of your calendar because a blog, is going to be wordy and take up a lot of space. But just having a consistent place to store it is important. So this way, everyone on the team knows where to find the latest blog post. They know where to find the social post copy. And the same thing with images. You want to make sure that you have either your image library is accessible to everybody. If you're creating templates or graphics, like maybe in Canva, that again, everybody can access those templates or graphics or they're stored somewhere. And I like to organize them by name. So if you have like a monthly feature, volunteer spotlight, you have a folder for volunteer spotlight, and that's where all those images live so that it's easy for everyone to find. And then same thing along the lines of creating the content. You want to again start to think about that strategy. That today we didn't talk too much about strategy today because it's really focused on the calendar. That's a whole separate webinar. But as you are creating your content strategy, you do want to make sure that your audience pain points are in mind. You're aligning with your mission. Adding that kind of personalized input. This is all really important as you're creating that content. You're developing thought leadership and also starting to think about content curation. So, you know, again, like either you don't have the time to create as much content as you want, or also you want to bring in those outside voices. That's where content curation comes into play. And I think most organizations are doing that just to, give a little bit more variety to the feed, as well as, like I said, bringing in those outside voices that are relevant and important to your organization. So this is the time as you're creating the content just to think about that. How will we approach content curation within our strategy? Where will we find it? Will you be looking at social media or blogs or interviews with people or user generated content? And then the frequency of that content curation as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too as we go through the calendar. All right. And then we want to think about, lastly, what can be repurposed. So in content strategy, repurposing is so key because, again, you can't write enough, sometimes. So you want to, again, make that list of evergreen topics. I've talked about that quite a bit. Plot out how something can be repurposed. So you have your impact report, where you can turn that into a blog post, you can turn that into a bunch of social media posts, you can turn that into a series of infographics. So you really want to keep that repurposing in mind whenever you are creating new content. It's really important. All right, so let's look at the templates now. So this will kind of start to pull things together, I think, visually. So here's an example of the calendar I mentioned that is created in Google Sheets. And to be honest, this is the one that I've been using mostly lately with my clients because I think that it's visual. It doesn't have that same, calendar, that month at a glance as I showed in the Trello, but I really like with some of my clients to be able to input their post copy and their hashtags and kind of see everything at a glance. And I think it's easier for them as well to see everything like this. So yeah, so this one, full disclosure, I've been using quite a bit myself and with clients. But you'll see that everything, some of these categories that we talked about are called out. So along the top, we have our main content channels, blog, email, socials. We have monthly themes here. Here are our events and campaigns. So like I'm a big fan of color coding or otherwise calling things out. So in green are the organizational events, and yellow are the holidays that the organization will be observing. And then here's a column for that category that I talked about. So this is that category type, or sometimes they'll call it like a content bucket, that this particular piece is related to. And again, like this is good to see visually how you're, make sure you're mixing it up. And then over here, you'll see I do include post copy. So in this particular calendar, I will actually type in the post copy. So it's, it can be copied and pasted for whoever is scheduling. And then these two here, you'll see where the schedule is starting to develop. So volunteer of the month is on the first Wednesday, program updates are on the second Monday. So that's repeated every month on the calendar. And sometimes I'll put those in yellow to kind of, call those out. They're repeated every month. And then again, color coding is your friend with calendars like these, where you can kind of call things out and see, okay, orange is a podcast, say if your organization does podcasting. So that's the first tab in this calendar. Then the next tab is where I store the categories or those content buckets. So here you can see, just kind of various, these are sample categories. Maybe you do behind the scenes. You might talk about fundraising, of course, impact, FAQs, case studies. So these are all, you want to really think about these and develop those based on your strategy, your content strategy, and have enough that you feel like, you have a varied topics for your content. And then over here, and this is, you don't have to do the content buckets, but for some organizations, it's helpful to think about like 3 main buckets that all of the content will fall under. So like in this one, I have like how our mission relates to our work, education relating to our mission, and storytelling. And then it just helps to create a framework. And again, this is tapping a little bit into strategy, but just something to think about as you're creating your calendar. And then the next tab is for content curation. So as we talked about, there is a rule of thumb that's been around for quite some time where 40% created and 60% curated. That's the rule of thumb that most organizations stick with. So, looking to see what could you use as created content is important. It's good to have. And this is just a place in the calendar to just start listing those so that, again, when you have an empty space in your calendar, you can go in there into your curated content tab and you can find something easily. And same thing for evergreen posts. Again, like they're great for SEO. So those are good to also have in your calendar. I make sure that I put a date there so that like you don't want to repeat them too often. So make sure you put the date there so you're not, rehashing it too often. And then here's a close-up of the Trello calendar template. So as you can see, it's in that like Kanban format, which is columns, if you're not familiar with that. You can look at the view in columns and you can look at the view as a calendar, which is helpful. But basically, same kind of thing, but sort of it's a little bit more expanded. So I have the column for campaigns and holidays, but then I also have a column for copy docs. So in this case, could put a link in here to like a Google Docs, document that has all the post copy in it, as well as like the image library, brand assets, and then on the right here, you could have some columns for ideas, that you share with your team. So just a little bit of a different approach, if you like that more visual approach and that kind of like Kanban workflow. Here's the rest of it. So there's also a column for like scheduled posts, evergreen content. So similar as the other one, but just kind of in a different way. So now let's talk about integrating your calendar with your scheduling. So you have the calendar, you're starting to build it out. And again, it's not going to happen overnight. Even with my clients, like it could take me a week to really get it built out in a way that feels comfortable and good. So, take your time, make sure that have everything what feels good and comfortable with your calendar. And then you can start to think about how you do your scheduling, how you scheduling the posts. So the first thing is to think about your needs and goals. So what channels are you using? How many different channels are you posting to and how often? What is your budget? Would you want strictly a free tool or maybe something that's paid? What type of analytics do you need to see from your social or your blogs? And then you may also consider, using those in-app tools. So for example, with one of my clients, I'm using Buffer, which is a scheduling tool. With the other client, we're using the Meta Business Suite because for them, they're really mainly just posting on Facebook and Instagram. There's also a lot of kind of conflicting data on whether those third-party tools suppress, engagement. I haven't seen definitive knowledge, for or against. So some people do say to stick with the native tool like Meta Business Suite for Facebook or Instagram, but I also, full disclosure, I use Buffer and some of those other scheduling tools as well. You'll see in the resources, I do have a list of those tools um, that offer a nonprofit discount because most of them do. So that's definitely something to think about as you are researching your tools, your scheduling tools. So here's an example. I mentioned I use Buffer for my own scheduling for a lot of my clients. I've also used Sprout Social, which is a more robust kind of all-in-one tool. Comes at a little bit of a higher price point. Um, so again, there's a very, very many out there. So it's hard to even suggest because there's so many and there's very similar, different price points. So a lot of times it takes really doing the free trial, and seeing what works best. So the second way is to integrate scheduling, or I'm sorry, the second thing to think about is how to integrate scheduling with your calendar. So you have your calendar, say you're using, the Google spreadsheet version. So then you have to think about how do I integrate that with scheduling? Because obviously that doesn't have, a calendar, a scheduling tool, I'm sorry, built in. So in that case, you'll be doing them independently. You'll have the content calendar and then you'll have the social scheduler in a different place. So a perfect example of that is, using the Google Sheets calendar and then pairing that with Buffer, which is the social scheduler. And that's something that I do with a lot of my clients where, it's fine, it's two different tools, but I like that kind of independence of not having to put everything into that social scheduling tool. But there are ones that are all in one. So like Sprout Social is a good example of that. It's a very robust tool. I've used that one. And that one does allow you to keep it all in one place if you'd like to. But like I said, I almost prefer that first approach where you do have the separate calendar. And then lastly, okay, yes, we have some time. I was trying to breeze through the end of the last few slides so we have time for questions. I will end with this quote from another wonderful content marketing expert, Anne Handley, she's an author, she's a speaker. I have most of her books and I've seen her speak a couple times. But she says, in an online world, our online words are our emissaries. They tell the world who we are. And I really love that because it's true. I think that especially, with nonprofits, we want to make sure that as we are putting our words out there, as writing those blogs and social posts and emails, that we're telling the world who we are, we're expressing our mission, that's all coming through. So I thought this was a great quote. And again, she's another person to look up if you're interested in content marketing. She has a couple of really good books about writing for content marketing. And like I said, she's a great speaker. I think she speaks, internationally. I see there's so many questions. So I hope that I'm going to put my last slide here with some of those links. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the resources page. So that's where you'll find some blogs, the templates I showed you, worksheets, a book list. Again, you'll see Andy Christadina's book and Ann Handley's book on that list. I am offering attendees a free 30-minute content chat if that's something of interest to you, to kind of go through your calendar. And then if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, so we can keep this up for a little bit if you'd like, Elise, and then start going through these questions. I hope I have enough time.
Yes, we have so many fantastic questions, Lydia. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I have learned so
Thank you.
much today, so I really appreciate that. Um, so we've got a ton of questions both from before the talk and then during the talk. So I'm going to focus on some of the questions from during your talk today because I think some of them are
Great.
great. Um, Somebody asked, within the framework of a content calendar, this was Angelica, by the way, how do you efficiently adjust for the unexpected, like news of updates that may affect the schedule for pre-planned content?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think this is the benefit of that agile, workflow that Content Marketing Institute encourages, people to do, is having some space in your calendar. So maybe there's, one day a week that you keep open, or, a couple days a month that you keep open, so that you have space, in case you need to post again. And of course, like, posting, if you have a schedule where you're posting once a day and something comes up, posting twice is okay. I don't think you want to go from posting once a day to posting 5 times a day, that kind of throw things off. But I think having a little bit of breathing room in the calendar is the best way to approach that. So whether it's a, couple days a month, or it's a specified day of the week, if you find that things seem to happen on Mondays, keep Mondays open. Have that open if something happens that day.
That's great. Thank you so much. Corinne asked, is it important to post about religious holidays and occasions? Their board decided not to post about holidays as there are so many and they didn't want to miss out on one. If they didn't post about them all, they're not going to post about any of them. What are your thoughts on this? They have a very broad audience.
Yes, I would say again, and before she said that, I would have said that. Like it's hard to post about all of them if you don't know, then you miss one, and you don't want that to happen. So I would say, unless there's a reason it's aligned with your mission, and with some organizations it is aligned with their mission, so it makes perfect sense that they are posting about all these holidays, and they have knowledge of all these holidays because it's ingrained into their mission. So I would say, you know if it's part of the mission, aligned with your mission and your messaging, then do it. But otherwise, I think you really, yeah, you have to think about what makes the most sense for your organization. What is your mission and vision and your audience? And again, better to err on the side of not posting than missing, a really important holiday to your audience. And that's also something that would be interesting to sort of talk to your audience and see what is important to them. Because if you do find that, yes, hearing about ways to celebrate these holidays is important to us, then you might want to figure out how to work that into your strategy. So I think part of it is, does it align with your mission? And then also talking to your audience and seeing how important it is to them.
That's great. Thank you, Lydia. This is a question that came up in our chat today and also came up in our pre-submitted questions as well. So I just want to get this one out there. I'm going to use Jared's words today from the chat. What advice do you have for smaller teams? For example, they have a 4-person team marketing and communications, but only one person has the bandwidth and skill to do graphic design, copywriting, and scheduling.
Yeah.
How can we all be more effective and supportive of our digital marketing content?
Yes. And hi, Jared. I can totally relate to this. I mean, this is me and my business as well. And so many of my clients that I've worked with are in the same place. And I think that, first of all, you'll see once you establish the calendar, I think that's going to be like a huge sigh of relief because you'll have the structure, you'll have everything kind of planned out. And, not to say that you might miss something here and there, being a one-person team or a small team. I know that happens, with me, with my own content marketing. But having that structure is so great. And that's the first step, having that structure. The next step is to have really solid graphic templates. So, again, once you have your calendar figured out, you can say, okay, once a month we're doing a volunteer spotlight, once a month we're doing an impact infographic, and then you have all those templates ready in Canva. So, you can create them yourself, you can partner with somebody outside the organization to create them. I do that quite often with my clients where I will create all those templates, social media templates for them. And then all they have to do is just recreate them monthly. But having those templates um, created, ready to go, anybody can jump into Canva and use them. That's the second thing that's going to make things so much easier for you. And then copywriting, I think in that case, having a place to store the copy so that you can, reuse it if you need to. You're not reinventing the wheel. And I don't mean you're going to copy and paste every month the same copy, but you can see what did we write last month and let's just tweak that a little bit. I think that's a great, there's AI tools to help with that as well, with taking you can take a blurb and kind of rewrite it. I think those 3 ways, having that calendar really set up and then figuring out which templates you need every month, and then having a place where you can easily access your copy and reuse the copy as needed. I think those 3 things are going to help extremely in this situation.
That's great. I think we've got time for just one more question, although we've got a ton here that folks submitted. Something that people are asking is, could you define an audience pain point?
Yes. So audience pain points are basically, the problem that your organization is solving. So this is like within your brand strategy. The way I describe a brand strategy is like who, what, and why. So who is your audience? What is like that problem that you're solving? And then the why is your unique, point of difference. What makes your organization stand out? So the pain point is really that problem that your organization is addressing, the problem that you are solving, trying to solve, addressing. That would be the pain point. So that would be what, a lot of times with content, that's what we focus on. We focus on either solving a problem for our audience. There's a couple of different ways you can approach it. So you can, and you want to mix them up in your content. So you want to have some of it focused on that problem solving, what we call the pain points. Some of it is focused on informing them, telling them what you're doing. And then some of it is just fun, just kind of interacting and showing the human side of the organization. So that's, yes. So those are the pain points. I know it's a little bit of a marketing speak. Thank you for
Thank,
asking.
thank you for defining that for us. It's always helpful when we can get those terms defined. We are at our time now, so I want to say thank you so much, Lydia, for everything you taught us today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure all of our guests did as well. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Before we go, I do want to let you know that there is going to be a very short survey that'll pop up after the session ends. It only takes about 20 seconds to complete, and it's really helpful for us to learn what was helpful, and how we can make these sessions better for you in the future. It would be great if you could fill that out for us. Our next webinar is coming up on March the 26th and is called The Changing Landscape of Canadian Donors. I did see tons of Canadians chime in the chat today, so please feel free to attend. I think it's going to be really helpful for all of us. And Chelsea is going to put a link to that in the chat for you to check out. Thank you all so, so much for attending, and I hope you have the best Tuesday, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Oh, and you'll get a recording as well as the slide deck by the end of the week. Bye, everybody.